The rain pounded against the windows of the train, a rhythmic, insistent reminder of the passage of time. Inside, passengers were lost in their worlds, some reading, others dozing, many scrolling through their phones. It was a typical Monday commute, the kind that blurred into the background of routine. But for one man, a single notification would shatter the monotony and bring the past crashing into the present. He clicked on the link, a YouTube video, innocuous and amateurish at first glance. The title read, "Strange Encounters, the Mystery Woman on Main Street." As the video played, his eyes widened, heart pounding in disbelief at the familiar face staring back at him. It was her, his wife, missing since 2007. Flashback to 2007. The crisp autumn air in the small town of Maplewood was filled with the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. Abigail Cole was a vibrant soul, known for her infectious laughter and unwavering kindness. A dedicated schoolteacher, she was beloved by colleagues and students alike. Her life seemed perfect, a tapestry woven with love, friendship, and a deep-seated passion for nurturing young minds. But beneath the surface, Abigail grappled with a growing sense of unease. Her husband, Mark, would later recall her restless nights and the way she lingered at the window, eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something or someone. Friends noticed her frequent distractions and the way her smile sometimes faltered, but when asked, she would wave off concerns with a laugh, attributing it to stress or fatigue. Then came the day that would alter the course of many lives. It was a chilly November morning when Abigail vanished without a trace. She had kissed Mark goodbye, promising to return early from her usual Saturday errands. But as the day wore on, a gnawing anxiety settled in Mark's chest. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and as dusk gave way to night, panic set in. The initial investigation was fervent, yet fruitless. Maplewood's small police force combed through every piece of Abigail's life, searching for clues. Her car was found abandoned on a quiet street, keys still in the ignition, and her purse on the passenger seat. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication of foul play. It was as if she had simply stepped out of her own life, leaving behind nothing but questions. As days turned to weeks, the search efforts dwindled, and the case began to grow cold. Mark was left grappling with a void, haunted by the absence of answers and the relentless whisper of what-ifs. The community, once vibrant with the hope of finding Abigail, gradually returned to the cadence of normalcy, though the shadow of her disappearance lingered. Years passed in a blur of unclaimed moments and fading memories. Mark learned to live with the uncertainty, though the ache of missing her never dulled. And then, out of the blue, came the video. A grainy snapshot of a woman on a crowded street, her face unmistakable to him. Could it truly be Abigail? Mark's trembling hands fumbled for his phone. The world seemed to tilt as he dialed, the line ringing with an urgency that matched his racing heart. The operator's voice crackled to life, and he spoke with a conviction born of desperation. "I think I've found my wife," he began, voice breaking. "She's been missing for 16 years. As the call connected him to a new chapter of uncertainty, the question hung in the air, unspoken yet palpable. What had happened to Abigail Cole on that fateful day in 2007? The line was silent for a moment, the weight of Mark's words hanging heavy in the air. He repeated himself, barely able to contain the urgency in his voice. The operator, though taken aback, assured him that his message would be forwarded to the authorities immediately. Flashback to 2007. The first 48 hours after Abigail's disappearance were a blur of frantic activity. The Maplewood Police Department, small and ill-prepared for such an event, was thrust into action. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and speaking with anyone who might have seen something. Anything out of the ordinary. Mark, exhausted and frantic, retraced Abigail's steps alongside the officers. He recounted her usual Saturday routine, providing any detail he could remember, hoping desperately that something would lead them to her. Friends and family gathered, their faces etched with worry as they organized search parties and printed missing person posters. Key witnesses emerged in those early hours, each with a piece of the puzzle. A shopkeeper on Main Street remembered seeing Abigail that morning, cheerful and in good spirits as she picked up her usual coffee. Another witness, a jogger, recalled seeing her car parked on the quiet street, though he couldn't remember the exact time. These fragments of information, though seemingly insignificant, were all the police had to go on. But in the chaos, critical mistakes were made. The police, overwhelmed by the scale of the search, failed to secure the area around Abigail's car. Potential evidence was trampled and overlooked in their haste to act. Traffic through the street was allowed to continue, erasing any hope of recovering tire tracks or footprints that might have offered a clue. Family members were questioned repeatedly, their frustration mounting as hours ticked by with no new leads. Mark found himself under scrutiny, his every move and word dissected. Though he understood it was protocol, the insinuation was a bitter pill to swallow. In those initial days, media attention was both a blessing and a curse. The story of Abigail's disappearance captured local headlines, and news crews descended on Maplewood, their cameras trained on the anxious community. The pressure to find her was immense, yet it also meant that every misstep by the police was broadcast for the world to see. As day turned to night, and then to day again, hope began to wane. The police, stretched thin and with no concrete evidence to guide them, were at a loss. The case was slipping through their fingers, and the realization was as chilling as the autumn air that swept through the town. But for Mark, each passing moment without Abigail was a lifetime. He clung to the belief that she was out there somewhere, waiting to be found, and as the investigation stalled, he vowed to do whatever it took to bring her home. The narrative of those first 48 hours was one of frantic desperation and heartbreaking oversight. Yet it was just the beginning of a journey that would span years, testing the limits of hope and resolve. Back to the present, Mark hung up the phone, his mind racing with possibilities. The video had reignited a spark within him, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, the mystery of Abigail's disappearance could finally be unraveled. But as he waited for a response from the police, a question loomed larger than ever. If that woman was truly Abigail, what had kept her away for all these years? The first 48 hours after Abigail's disappearance were a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. The police arrived at the couple's modest home, their presence a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and interviewing anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual. Yet as the hours passed, it became painfully clear that key procedures were being mishandled. The lead investigator, a seasoned detective named Harris, was juggling multiple cases, and the urgency of finding Abigail was palpable. But the department was understaffed, and resources stretched thin. Calls to neighboring jurisdictions for additional support went unanswered, leaving Harris and his team to navigate a delicate balance of protocol and instinct. Witnesses were scarce. An elderly neighbor recalled seeing Abigail leave for her morning jog, her usual routine. Another spoke of a suspicious vehicle parked down the street, but the description was vague at best. A dark sedan, no license plate remembered. The lack of security cameras in the quiet neighborhood compounded the challenge. Inside the house, Mark was questioned repeatedly. His alibi, at work during the time of her disappearance, was corroborated by colleagues, yet the scrutiny was relentless. The police searched for signs of a struggle, but the home was pristine. No forced entry, nothing missing, just an absence that spoke volumes. Mark's frustration mirrored the growing tension within the community. Friends and family gathered at the house, their presence a source of both comfort and claustrophobia. Abigail's parents arrived in a haze of disbelief, their worry etched into every line on their faces. Together they watched as the investigation unfolded, powerless against the tide of uncertainty. In those critical early hours, critical mistakes were made. The police failed to issue an Amber Alert, citing a lack of evidence pointing to an abduction. Time, precious and fleeting, slipped away unnoticed. Leads grew cold before they could be pursued, and the media's attention, once a beacon of hope, began to wane as newer stories emerged. Mark took to the streets distributing flyers, pleading with anyone who would listen. His desperation was met with sympathetic glances and hollow promises. The weight of inaction bore down on him, as did the whispers that perhaps Abigail had left of her own volition. But Mark knew his wife. He knew she wouldn't just leave without a word. A local reporter, sensing the gravity of the situation, took an interest in the story. Her persistence kept Abigail's name in the headlines, but it was a double-edged sword. The coverage brought attention, yes, but also speculation and doubt. Theories ran rampant, each more far-fetched than the last, muddying the waters of an already complex case. As the sun set on the second day, Mark stood at the kitchen window staring into the darkness. The house felt different, as if the walls themselves mourned Abigail's absence. He clung to hope, even as it felt like sand slipping through his fingers. The police, he realized, might not find the answers he desperately sought. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. Back in the present, Mark's phone buzzed, jolting him back to the reality of the moment. It was the police finally responding to his call about the YouTube video. His heart raced as he answered, the future uncertain, but suddenly filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Who was the woman in the video? And what secrets did she hold? Mark's voice trembled as he spoke into the phone, grappling with the hope and fear that tangled in his chest. The detective on the other end listened intently, asking precise questions about the video, the woman, and the gut feeling Mark couldn't shake. Promises were made, an investigation would be opened and they would get to the bottom of it. But Mark, having weathered the storm of inaction before, remained cautiously optimistic. Rewind to those first frantic hours after Abigail's disappearance. The police arrived at the couple's modest home, their demeanor professional but detached. Mark's recounting of the morning she vanished felt like a desperate plea to ears that were predisposed to skepticism. He told them about Abigail's routine, how she never missed her morning walk unless something was wrong. But the officers, bound by protocol, were hesitant to label the case as suspicious without more concrete evidence. The first 48 hours ticked by with a cruel indifference. Key witnesses, like the elderly neighbor who often waved at Abigail on her walks, were overlooked. Her recollection of seeing a strange car idling near the corner seemed insignificant at the time, a detail lost in the shuffle of paper and procedure. Another neighbor, a young mother who thought she saw Abigail speaking to someone in a dark sedan that morning, wasn't interviewed until weeks later, her memory faded and unreliable. The family was left in disarray. Abigail's sister flew in from out of state, her presence a balm for Mark's nerves, but also a reminder of the gravity of the situation. Together, they retraced Abigail's last known steps, hoping to stumble upon something the police might have missed. Flyer after flyer was posted, the smiling face of Abigail becoming a haunting fixture in the neighborhood. Back at the police station, the case file sat on a desk, buried beneath a pile of other priorities. The lead detective, overworked and understaffed, juggled more cases than he could handle. A clerical error meant the surveillance footage from the nearby grocery store wasn't reviewed until it was too late, the tape overwritten by newer recordings. A crucial misstep that would haunt the investigation for years to come. The media's spotlight grew dimmer each day, the story slipping from front-page news to a small column on page 5. Theories swirled, some pointing fingers at Mark, others concocting wild tales of Abigail's secret life. The noise drowned out genuine leads, turning the investigation into a cacophony of confusion. Mark stood resolute amidst the chaos, his resolve hardened by the lack of progress. He became an investigator in his own right, doggedly pursuing every rumor, every whisper of a sighting. But as the days turned to weeks, hope waned, and the reality of Abigail's absence settled like a weight on his chest. Now, with the discovery of the YouTube video, a new chapter was about to begin. Mark's heart raced as he awaited the next call from the police, a call that could either reignite the investigation or dash the fragile hope he'd dared to nurture. The woman in the video, who was she? And how could she hold the key to unraveling the mystery of Abigail's disappearance? As Mark pondered these questions, the shadows of the past loomed large, whispering secrets yet to be uncovered. Mark sat by the phone, every ring a potential lifeline, every silence a reminder of how much had been lost. The video had sparked something, an ember of hope that refused to be extinguished, even by the passage of time. Yet as he waited, the investigation itself seemed to grind to a halt. In the early days, the police were eager to follow leads, but resources were stretched thin. They focused first on those closest to Abigail. Mark found himself under the microscope, his life dissected and scrutinized. Questions about his alibi for the day Abigail vanished, the state of their marriage, and even his finances were hurled at him with unforgiving intensity. He answered each one, his frustration mounting, but the whispers persisted. Neighbors exchanged glances, their conversations laced with suspicion. Rumors spread like wildfire. Abigail had been having an affair. She had run away to start a new life, or worse, she had met with foul play at the hands of someone she trusted. Each theory seemed to gain traction, fueled by the absence of concrete evidence. Among the names mentioned as potential suspects was a local handyman who had worked on their home just weeks before Abigail's disappearance. Known for his temper and a past marred by minor run-ins with the law, he was an easy target. The police brought him in for questioning, and the community held its breath, eager for resolution. Yet the handyman provided a solid alibi, corroborated by receipts and witness statements. His annoyance at being dragged into the fray was palpable, but he understood the gravity of the situation. As he walked out of the station, cleared of suspicion, the collective sigh of disappointment was almost audible. The list of suspects dwindled, small-time criminals and familiar faces briefly thrown into the spotlight, only to be dismissed. Each false lead sent the investigation further into the weeds, the trail growing colder with each passing day. Back in the community, the chatter continued, but the energy surrounding the case waned. Without a clear direction, the police's focus shifted to newer cases, fresher tragedies demanding attention. Abigail's story, once a fervent topic of discussion, became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how easily someone could slip through the cracks of everyday life. Mark refused to let the memories fade. He spent hours poring over every detail, reliving the last moments he had with Abigail, hoping to divine some overlooked clue. He reached out to private investigators, but they too hit the same dead ends. The more he pushed, the more elusive the truth became. And now with the video, a glimmer of possibility beckoned once more. Could this lead finally break the cycle of dead ends? As Mark pondered, the phone rang, the sound slicing through the oppressive silence. He lunged for it, hope and dread entwined in his heart. The voice on the other end was calm, methodical. They had identified the background in the video, a train station on the outskirts of a small town, many miles from where Abigail had vanished. The investigation was set to move in a new direction, and with it Mark felt the stirrings of a long-dormant resolve. As he hung up, the questions loomed larger than ever. Who was the woman in the video, and why did she resemble Abigail so closely? The threads of the past began to weave a new pattern, one that Mark was determined to unravel. The silence that had once suffocated him now crackled with possibility. The train station was a place Mark had never heard of, tucked away in the countryside, a forgotten relic of a town that seemed as elusive as the answers he sought. The video had opened a door, but what lay beyond was still shrouded in mystery. The investigation once again found itself at a precipice, teetering between resurgence and dormancy. As Mark sat in his small living room, surrounded by scattered papers and photographs of Abigail, the voice on the phone echoed in his mind. The train station was a lead, one that might finally break the cycle of cold trails, but the path to it was fraught with uncertainty. The police, while interested, were stretched thin. Their resources were divided among countless cases, and Abigail's disappearance, despite its recent flare of activity, was not their highest priority. In the weeks that followed, the local authorities did their due diligence. They visited the train station, interviewed the sparse population of the town, and scrutinized the video frame by frame. Yet each potential lead dissolved under scrutiny, like sand slipping through fingers. The woman in the video resembling Abigail was nowhere to be found. No one in the town recognized her, and the station's security footage from that day had long been erased, overwritten by the routine passage of daily commuters. Rumors began to circulate within the community. Whispers of illicit affairs, secret lives, and hidden identities spread like wildfire. Speculation ran rampant, each theory more outlandish than the last. Some suggested Abigail had orchestrated her own disappearance, while others believed she had fallen victim to a wandering predator. The truth, elusive and shadowed, remained just out of reach. Amidst the chaos, the investigation faltered. The small-town police force, lacking the resources and manpower to pursue every lead, began to focus elsewhere. New cases with fresher trails and clearer evidence demanded their attention. Abigail's case, once the centerpiece of their efforts, began to gather dust. Mark, however, was not deterred. Despite the lack of progress, his resolve only hardened. He contacted anyone who might have seen the video, scoured online forums and social media, and even reached out to amateur sleuths in the hopes of reigniting interest in Abigail's story. Each day was a battle against despair, but he refused to let the silence of the investigation swallow him whole. Yet as weeks turned into months, the once vibrant chatter of the community faded. Abigail's name, once a rallying cry, slipped into the background. The town moved on, its collective focus shifting to new stories, new tragedies, but for Mark, time stood still. The video, the woman, the possibility that Abigail was out there, these thoughts consumed him, driving him to the brink of obsession. And then, just as hope seemed to wane, a new piece of information emerged. It was small, almost insignificant, a forgotten detail buried in an old police report. But to Mark it was a beacon, a glimmer of light in the encroaching darkness. The investigation had hit a wall, but this new lead promised a way through. What was this detail, and how could it reignite the search for Abigail? The questions loomed, each one a tantalizing thread in the tapestry of truth. As Mark prepared to follow this new path, he knew that the answers he sought were closer than ever. The next step could change everything. The forgotten detail, a name scribbled hastily in the margins of an old police report, belonged to a man who had once been a person of interest. His connection to Abigail was tenuous at best, a former colleague from her tenure at the local library. The man, Robert Timmons, had been interviewed briefly during the initial investigation, but was quickly dismissed when nothing substantial tied him to her disappearance. Yet the note hinted at an undisclosed meeting between him and Abigail on the very day she vanished. Mark's heart raced as he pored over the report once more. Could this meeting have been more significant than it seemed? Why hadn't it been pursued further? Driven by a newfound sense of urgency, he tracked down Timmons, now living a quiet life on the outskirts of town. Robert Timmons maintained his innocence, insisting that their meeting was merely coincidental, a brief encounter over coffee to discuss a library project. Yet his demeanor was nervous, and his eyes darted as he spoke. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something unsaid lingering beneath the surface. The community, once fervently engaged, now seemed wary of rekindling the past. Rumors swirled, painting Robert as a recluse with a dark past, though none could provide concrete evidence. Whispers of an unrequited love for Abigail surfaced, a narrative too tempting for the town to resist, but too flimsy for the authorities to pursue. As the investigation hit a wall, the town grew restless. Suspicions spread like wildfire, fueled by gossip and innuendo. Each whispered accusation further muddied the waters, clouding judgment and stoking the fires of distrust. The once clear path to truth became a labyrinth of shadows and echoes. The police, overwhelmed by the cacophony of rumors and lacking viable leads, began to divert their focus elsewhere. New crimes demanded their attention, and resources were stretched thin. Abigail's case, once vibrant with potential, began to fade into the background, an unsolved mystery collecting dust in the annals of the department's archives. Mark, undeterred by the mounting challenges, refused to let the trail go cold. He continued to dig, convinced that somewhere within the tangled web of half-truths and forgotten memories lay the key to finding Abigail. Yet, with each passing day, the burden of uncertainty weighed heavier upon him. In the quiet moments, Mark grappled with the haunting possibility that he might never find the answers he sought. But just as despair threatened to overtake him, a call from an unexpected source changed everything. A retired detective once involved in the case reached out with information that could finally break the stalemate. What did this detective know, and how could it alter the course of the investigation? The promise of new insight loomed large, offering a glimmer of hope in the relentless pursuit of truth. As Mark prepared for this new chapter, he knew that the answers lay closer than ever, just beyond the veil of mystery that had shrouded Abigail's disappearance for so long. The call from the retired detective came out of the blue, a lifeline tossed into the sea of Mark's despair. The detective's voice, weathered by years of service and burdened by unsolved cases, carried the weight of experience and the promise of revelation. "I believe I have something that might interest you," the detective said, his words measured and deliberate. "It's not much, but it's something I couldn't shake from my mind all these years." Mark's heart quickened, his mind racing ahead, imagining possibilities, scenarios, and truths long buried. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely concealing his anticipation. "Back then, we received an anonymous tip," the detective continued, "a sighting of Abigail in a small town just a few states over. It was dismissed at the time due to lack of evidence, but I never forgot it. Something about the caller's insistence stuck with me." A glimmer of hope sparked within Mark, cutting through the fog of years spent in limbo. "Do you have any details? Anything we can follow up on?" The detective hesitated, a pause heavy with unspoken complexities. "I kept a copy of the report. It's not much, just a description and a location, but it might be worth looking into." As Mark jotted down the information, the years of silence and unanswered questions seemed to press in on him, a reminder of the time lost and the weight of family expectations unmet. Abigail's parents had grown older, their health declining with each passing year, their hope diminishing as the seasons turned and their daughter remained absent from their lives. Meanwhile, the community, once vibrant with shared purpose in the quest for truth, had moved on. New stories, new scandals, and new tragedies had captured their attention. The local paper that once featured Abigail's face on its front page now filled its columns with tales of other missing persons, other heartbreaks that demanded their empathy. Yet, among the silent streets and the whispered memories, Mark had refused to let go. He had become a fixture in the town, a living monument to persistence, his life a testament to the unseen labor of love that drove him to keep searching. He had hired private investigators, scoured internet forums, and even reached out to psychics in the desperate hope of finding a clue, any clue, that would lead him back to Abigail. But through it all, the years had a way of taking their toll. Friends who once rallied beside him drifted away, their lives moving forward as his remained frozen in time. The strain on his relationships, the financial burden of the search, and the constant cycle of hope and disappointment had etched lines into his face, marking him as a man forever waiting. As Mark hung up the phone, clutching the fragile thread of new information, he knew he was standing at a crossroads. This lead, though faint and distant, was a chance to reignite the investigation, to breathe life back into a case that had almost slipped into oblivion. It was a flicker of light in the dark corridor of his search, and he was determined to follow it no matter where it led. What truths would this new avenue uncover? And could it finally bring an end to the years of silence, offering answers to a family haunted by ghosts and shadows of the past? The journey was far from over, and as Mark prepared to chase this slender hope, he understood that the path to finding Abigail was as fraught with mystery as ever. The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking, not just for him, but for everyone who had loved and lost her. Mark sat in the dim light of his study, the room a testament to years of relentless searching. Walls lined with documents, photographs, and maps chronicled his journey, each item a piece of a puzzle that had yet to be solved. The phone call had been brief, a whisper of hope from a voice he barely knew, suggesting a lead that seemed both incredible and impossible. But after all these years, Mark had learned that sometimes the most improbable paths could lead to the truth. As he prepared to follow this new lead, his mind wandered back to the years that had slipped away like sand through his fingers. The early days had been a whirlwind of activity and support. Friends and family had gathered, organizing search parties, distributing flyers, and offering words of encouragement. But as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, the fervor had subsided, leaving behind a quiet, aching void. The community that had once rallied around him slowly returned to the rhythm of their lives. New families moved in, old ones moved away, and the town, with its gentle hills and winding streets, seemed to forget. Abigail's disappearance became a ghost story whispered among children, a tragic tale that adults avoided in polite conversation. The case files, once opened with urgency, were now buried under layers of dust in some forgotten corner of the police station. For Mark, however, forgetting was never an option. Each day was a battle against the silence that threatened to swallow him whole. He hired private investigators when he could afford it, each one bringing a glimmer of hope that was quickly dashed. He scoured online forums late into the night, connecting with strangers who shared similar heartaches, their stories intertwining in a digital tapestry of loss. And then there were the psychics, the mystics, who promised visions and insights. In his desperation, Mark had listened to their cryptic messages, sifting through their words for any kernel of truth. Yet each visit left him feeling more adrift, caught between the tangible world and an ethereal realm that offered no concrete answers. The years had not been kind. The financial strain of his quest was immense, savings depleted, dreams deferred. His relationships, once strong and vibrant, had suffered under the weight of his obsession. Friends drifted away, unable to watch him cling to a past that refused to let go. Even his family, steadfast in their support, began to encourage him to move on, to find a way to live in the present. But how could he? How could he let go when every fiber of his being was tethered to the hope of seeing Abigail again? The thought of her out there, alone and possibly frightened, was a fire that burned within him, unquenchable and consuming. Now, as he sat in the quiet of his study, Mark felt the weight of all those silent years. This new lead, fragile and tenuous, was a chance to break the cycle, to finally bring an end to the haunting questions that had plagued him. He knew the risks, the possibility of another dead end, another heartbreak, but he also knew that he had come too far to turn back. As he prepared to chase this slender thread of hope, his heart beat with a mixture of fear and anticipation. What if this was it? What if he was on the verge of discovering the truth? The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking, not just for him, but for everyone who had loved and lost Abigail. With a deep breath, Mark rose from his chair, determination etched into his features. The long silence had held its grip for too long, and it was time to shatter it, to bring Abigail home. But as he stepped into the unknown, he was haunted by a single, unrelenting question. What if the truth was more devastating than the silence? Mark stood at the threshold of his study, the room a silent witness to years of relentless searching and unyielding hope. The walls were lined with files, each one a testament to a lead pursued, a clue followed, yet all ending in the same frustrating silence. His heart, a drumbeat of anticipation, propelled him forward into the unknown. The community had long since moved on, the whispers of Abigail's disappearance now just echoes in the corridors of the town's collective memory. New stories had taken precedence, new faces emerging in the tapestry of daily life. Yet for Mark, time was a cruel illusion, each passing day only deepening the chasm between the present and that fateful evening in 2007 when Abigail had vanished into thin air. The family had been a pillar, unwavering in their support, yet even they had felt the strain. His daughter, now grown, had once been a child who waited by the window for her mother to return. She had learned to carry the weight of her mother's absence, her childhood tinged with the shadow of unanswered questions. Conversations at family gatherings often danced delicately around the topic, a silent agreement, to shield one another from the pain that still lingered just beneath the surface. Mark's private investigation had become his life's work, an unending journey that had taken him to the farthest corners of possibility. He had consulted with experts, sifted through digital trails, and even traveled to distant places where sightings had been rumored. Yet, despite the breadth of his efforts, Abigail's fate remained an enigma, a puzzle with missing pieces. The years of silence had not only tested personal relationships, but had also drained the family's resources. The financial burden was a constant reminder of the stakes involved, of the precious time lost in the pursuit of a truth that seemed to slip further away with each passing year. Friends, once eager to assist, had grown weary of the relentless cycle of hope and despair, their support waning as the years dragged on. But through it all, Mark had never wavered. The image of Abigail, vibrant and full of life, was seared into his memory, a beacon guiding him through the darkest moments. He carried her with him, her laughter a distant echo in his heart, her absence a constant ache in his soul. Now, as he clutched the fragile lead that had sparked a new fire within him, he was driven by the possibility that the silence might finally be broken. The YouTube video, A serendipitous discovery during a train ride had reignited his hope, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the life that Abigail might now be living. As he prepared to follow this new trail, the weight of the years pressed heavily upon him, yet he stood resolute. The silence had been long and cruel, but the promise of truth, no matter how devastating, was a light that pierced the darkness. Mark knew that the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, that each step could bring him closer to a revelation that would shatter the life he had known. Yet as he embarked on this latest chapter of his journey, he carried with him the unyielding belief that the answers lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be uncovered. The silence, he vowed, would not have the final word. And so, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unbroken by time, Mark set out once more, determined to find Abigail, to bring her home, and to finally lay the silence to rest. As Mark embarked on this new chapter, a sense of urgency propelled him forward. He was not alone in this newfound pursuit. Unbeknownst to him, a parallel investigation was quietly gaining momentum, driven by a fresh face with a relentless spirit. Detective Claire Henderson had recently joined the cold case unit, bringing with her a reputation for tenacity and a keen eye for detail. Her arrival coincided with a surge in technological advancements, and she was eager to apply these tools to cases long considered dormant. The case of Abigail Williams had crossed her desk only days ago, a file thick with history and heartache. The intricacies of the case, the years of silence, and the whispers of a woman lost in time fascinated her. It was the kind of mystery that called to her, whispering secrets and beckoning her to delve deeper. Claire's attention was immediately drawn to the YouTube video that had captivated Mark's heart and reignited the search for Abigail. The footage was grainy, yet the resemblance was uncanny. She knew that such leads, though tenuous, could illuminate paths long hidden in shadow. The detective's determination to breathe new life into the investigation was bolstered by the advent of genetic genealogy, an innovative technique that had revolutionized cold case resolutions. This method, combining DNA analysis with public genealogy databases, had cracked cases once thought unsolvable. With this in mind, Claire reached out to the forensic lab, requesting a re-examination of the evidence collected years ago. Among the items was a faded scarf, found abandoned near the last place Abigail was seen. It was a piece of evidence that had thus far yielded no results, but technology had evolved. The possibility of uncovering a genetic fingerprint, a thread linking the past to the present, filled Claire with anticipation. She knew the chances were slim, yet the potential breakthrough was too significant to ignore. As the lab technicians began their meticulous work, the clock seemed to tick louder, each second a reminder of the years lost. It was a delicate dance, one that balanced hope with the harsh realities of time and decay. Meanwhile, Mark continued his own investigation, reaching out to the creator of the video in hopes of tracing its origins. The response was swift and encouraging, a willingness to assist in any way possible, a shared desire to uncover the truth. As these parallel paths converged, a glimmer of hope began to shine through the darkness. The silence, once suffocating, now seemed poised to give way to a chorus of revelations. Mark and Claire, though strangers, were united in purpose, a shared mission to unravel the mystery that had ensnared Abigail's fate. The days that followed were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Forensic scientists worked tirelessly, their efforts focused on extracting the genetic material that might hold the key to Abigail's fate. Each day, Claire awaited any news with bated breath, knowing that this could be the breakthrough they had long sought. Finally, a call came through. The lab had results, and they were nothing short of astonishing. A match had been found, a distant relative, a connection that had eluded them for years. As Claire prepared to pursue this new lead, a chill of anticipation ran down her spine. The silence had indeed been broken, and what lay ahead was a path fraught with potential and peril. The truth, long buried, was beginning to surface, and as they edged closer to the heart of the mystery, the question loomed larger than ever. Who had been hiding in plain sight all along? The phone call hung in the air, its implications vast and labyrinthine. Claire, with a steady yet trembling hand, jotted down the specifics. A name that had never surfaced in their years of searching. This distant relative was their first tangible link, a thread that connected the enigma of Abigail's existence to a broader family tree. The knowledge was both exhilarating and daunting. As Claire set the phone down, her thoughts raced. Could this relative hold the key to the mystery, or would they simply be another dead end? There was only one way to find out: a trip to a small town in the Midwest, where the relative resided, oblivious to the storm about to descend upon their quiet life. Meanwhile, Mark was relentless in his pursuit. The creator of the YouTube video had provided crucial information. The original footage was sourced from a tourist who had been filming their journey across the picturesque landscape of the Pacific Northwest. There, among the blurred faces and flickering frames, Mark had glimpsed a figure that resembled Abigail. It was a mere glimpse, a shadow of a possibility, yet it was enough to propel him forward. The momentum was undeniable. With every revelation, the narrative shifted, inching closer to the truth. Mark and Claire, each on their own trajectory, were converging upon a singular point of discovery. As Claire boarded a plane to the Midwest, her mind was a whirl of possibilities. She imagined the moment of confrontation, the unveiling of truths long buried. Yet beneath her determination lay a kernel of fear. Fear of what she might uncover and the lives that would irrevocably change in the process. The new detective on the case, Detective Lee, brought with him a fresh perspective and a wealth of experience in cold cases. His reputation for tenacity and his uncanny ability to see patterns others missed made him an invaluable ally. He welcomed the challenge with a steely resolve, determined to solve the mystery that had stumped so many before him. Lee's first task was to re-examine the evidence with the latest in forensic technology. Genetic genealogy had revolutionized the field, and he was eager to apply it to the case. The potential to identify unknown DNA profiles from Abigail's belongings was tantalizing, a prospect that promised to illuminate the shadowy corners of the investigation. Back in the lab, the scientists worked meticulously, their efforts concentrated on extracting viable genetic material. Each breakthrough was celebrated, each setback meticulously analyzed. The process was painstaking, a testament to the resilience and dedication of those who refused to let Abigail's story fade into obscurity. Claire arrived in the Midwest, her mind a kaleidoscope of questions and hopes. The relative, a distant cousin by marriage, was a kind-hearted retiree living in a modest home. As Claire explained the purpose of her visit, the woman's eyes widened in disbelief. She had no knowledge of Abigail, yet her willingness to help was genuine and immediate. With a DNA sample secured, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than a search for answers. It was a quest for justice, for closure, for the restoration of a life interrupted. As she left the town, the sun setting behind her in hues of gold and crimson, Claire felt the weight of the moment, a glimmer of hope, fragile yet vibrant, guiding her onward. In the days that followed, Detective Lee's efforts bore fruit. The genetic genealogy analysis was underway, promising to unlock connections previously sealed by time and circumstance. The silence that had once been a shroud now felt like a prelude, a quiet before the storm of revelations that was sure to follow. And so, with the pieces falling into place, the question loomed larger than ever. Had they finally found the key to the mystery, or were there still secrets waiting to be unearthed from the depths of the past? As the genetic genealogy analysis progressed, anticipation hung in the air like the charged atmosphere before a storm. Each day brought Claire and Detective Lee closer to unraveling the tangled web that had ensnared Abigail's life for far too long. The scientists, fueled by a mix of coffee and determination, worked tirelessly, scanning through databases, comparing genetic markers, seeking the elusive thread that would connect the past to the present. Then, one morning, the silence was broken by the shrill ring of Detective Lee's phone. His heart raced as he answered, knowing that any call could carry the weight of a breakthrough. On the other end was Dr. Ramirez, the lead geneticist, her voice tinged with excitement. "We have a match," she declared, the significance of her words echoing in the confines of Lee's small office. "The DNA from Abigail's belongings connects to a family tree we've been building. It's not a direct match, but close enough to warrant further investigation." Lee could hardly contain his excitement. "Who are we talking about?" An individual by the name of Rachel Givens, Dr. Ramirez replied. She's a second cousin, once removed, lives in a small town in Oregon. It might be a lead worth pursuing. The name was unfamiliar, but it represented a thread, a tangible connection to Abigail. Lee immediately contacted Claire, his voice brimming with a mix of urgency and hope. We might have something, a second cousin, out in Oregon. It's a long shot, but it's the first real lead we've had in years. Claire's response was immediate. Let's not waste any time. I'll catch the first flight out. As Claire prepared for her journey, another unexpected piece of the puzzle surfaced. An anonymous tipster had contacted the local police station, claiming to have information about Abigail's disappearance. The timing was uncanny, almost as if the universe itself was conspiring to bring the truth to light. The tipster, an elderly woman residing in a care facility, insisted she had been holding on to a secret for years, a secret she could no longer keep. With Claire en route to Oregon, Lee decided to visit the care facility. The woman, frail but sharp-eyed, met him with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She introduced herself as Miriam, and her story unfolded with the gravity of a long-held confession. I knew Abigail, Miriam began, her voice a whisper of the past. She was a lovely girl, full of life, but there was something she stumbled upon, something she shouldn't have seen. I didn't believe it at first, but now I'm certain. The revelation was shrouded in ambiguity, yet Lee sensed its potential importance. Miriam's eyes, once clouded with years, now shone with a clarity born of unburdening. What did she see, Miriam? Lee pressed gently, aware of the fragility of her memories. The man she trusted, Miriam replied, her words landing like a stone in a still pond. A man with secrets darker than night. As Miriam's confession lingered in the air, Lee's mind raced. Could this man be the killer in plain sight they'd been searching for? The answers seemed tantalizingly close, yet still just out of reach. With Claire on her way to Oregon and Miriam's revelations fresh in his mind, Lee knew the investigation was entering a critical phase. The pieces were aligning, each one a step closer to uncovering the truth. But the question remained. Would they finally unearth the secrets buried with Abigail's disappearance, or would the darkness cast its shadow once more? Lee left the care facility with Miriam's words echoing in his mind, a haunting melody of the past that refused to quiet. The man she trusted, a phrase that could unravel everything or lead them down yet another dead end. As Claire drove through the winding roads toward Oregon, Lee felt the weight of urgency pressing down on him. The tip from Miriam was the first real lead they'd had in years, and he couldn't afford to let it slip through their fingers. Back at the precinct, Lee gathered the team. The room was filled with the murmur of anticipation, a collective breath held in suspense. They had a name, a vague description of a man shadowed by secrets. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Lee knew they needed to dig deeper, to explore every angle of Abigail's life that might have intersected with this mysterious figure. They began by sifting through Abigail's emails, social media, and phone records from the months leading up to her disappearance. It was painstaking work, each click and scroll like turning the pages of a forgotten diary. Then a breakthrough, an email chain with a name that matched one of the vague descriptions Miriam had given. A man named David, someone Abigail had met through a community gardening club. As the team delved into David's background, a pattern started to emerge. He was charming, well-liked, but there were whispers, rumors of a temper, of business dealings that skirted the law. Lee's instincts told him this was the man Miriam had spoken of. But instinct wasn't enough. They needed evidence. While the team worked, Claire arrived in Oregon, her determination as fierce as ever. She joined a local PI who had offered to help, hoping to connect the dots between Miriam's confession and David's shadowy past. They interviewed former club members, piecing together a timeline that placed David and Abigail at several events in the weeks before her disappearance. Back in the lab, forensic analysts were combing through old evidence, searching for anything that might tie David to Abigail. It was a long shot, but they had one piece that hadn't been fully examined, a hair found in Abigail's car, one that didn't match her or her husband's DNA. The analysts worked tirelessly, running the hair through updated databases with advanced technology that hadn't been available years ago. The results were astonishing. The DNA matched a relative of David's, confirming his connection to Abigail's car. It was the first tangible link they had, a thread that could unravel the entire mystery. With this new evidence in hand, Lee felt the momentum shift. The pieces were aligning, and the shadows that had obscured the truth were beginning to recede. But as they prepared to confront David, an unexpected twist emerged. Another tip came in, this time from a former neighbor of Abigail's, claiming to have seen her alive months after her disappearance. The revelation threatened to upend everything they thought they knew. The clock was ticking, and as the team raced to verify the neighbor's story, Lee couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. The truth was within reach, but the question remained. Would they grasp it in time, or would it slip away once more into the shadows? The revelation from the neighbor sent ripples of doubt through the investigation team. Could Abigail have truly been alive months after they thought she'd vanished? Lee knew they needed to verify this claim quickly, but the hair sample linking David to Abigail's car was too significant to ignore. The tension in the room was palpable as they balanced chasing this new lead with solidifying the case against David. Claire, now back in touch with Lee, was briefed on the latest developments. Her resolve was unshaken. She believed they were closer than ever to solving the case. The neighbor's story was intriguing, but Claire suspected it might be a case of mistaken identity or misinformation. Nonetheless, she and the PI wasted no time in tracking down the neighbor to get a first-hand account. Back at the lab, forensic analysts focused on the hair sample, pushing the limits of their resources to extract more information. They were relentless, knowing that every minute counted. Using cutting-edge technology, they mapped out the genetic profile, hoping it might reveal more about its source. The results were compelling, a familial match that pointed directly to David's estranged brother, a man with a history of violence and a penchant for vanishing without a trace. Meanwhile, Lee and his team pulled records on David's brother, piecing together a life that had been marked by run-ins with the law and disappearances from the public eye. It was becoming clear that the brother had been the shadowy figure in David's life, the one Miriam had alluded to in her chilling confession. The breakthrough provided a new angle. If David's brother had been involved, it explained the neighbor's sighting. Could Abigail have been held captive, only to escape briefly before disappearing again? The theory was dark and unsettling, yet it fit the pattern they had uncovered. In Oregon, Claire and the PI met with the neighbor, a woman whose eyes held the weight of years of uncertainty. She recounted the sighting with conviction, describing a woman who looked like Abigail, but different, worn, as if she'd been through an ordeal. The neighbor's description matched the timeline of David's brother's known whereabouts, adding weight to the theory that he was the key to finding Abigail. As the pieces of the puzzle began to snap into place, Lee gathered the team. They were poised on the edge of a precipice, the fog of confusion lifting to reveal a path forward. The next step was clear. They needed to locate David's brother, the elusive figure who had slipped through so many cracks. But just as they were about to move, another ripple of information reached Lee. A private message sent through an anonymous account claimed to hold the final piece of the puzzle. The sender promised irrefutable evidence of David's brother's involvement, but only if they could meet in person. The clock was ticking and the stakes had never been higher. As Lee prepared to follow this new lead, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were closer than ever to uncovering the truth. The shadows were receding, and the light of justice was finally within reach. But who was behind the anonymous message? And would this be the breakthrough they so desperately needed, or another twist in an already tangled web? The meeting was set for a nondescript coffee shop on the outskirts of Portland, a place where anonymity was as much a part of the decor as the mismatched chairs and faded posters. Lee arrived early, his mind whirring with possibilities. Who was this mysterious informant, and what could they possibly know that would finally unravel the Gordian knot of Abigail's disappearance? As the minutes ticked by, Lee's eyes scanned the room, noting every face, every movement. Then, a figure entered, hooded and cautious, scanning the room before locking eyes with Lee. The figure approached, sliding into the seat across from him with a deliberate calmness that belied the tension in the air. Without preamble, The informant reached into a worn satchel, producing a small, unassuming USB drive. "This is what you need." The voice was low, steady. "It's the evidence you've been searching for." Lee's heart pounded as he took the drive, his fingers closing around it with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "What's on it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Recordings," the informant replied. "Conversations you wouldn't believe unless you heard them yourself. David's brother. He's not who you think he is. There are others involved, but he's the linchpin. This will prove it." The weight of the words hung between them, heavy and foreboding. Lee knew the implications were vast, but there was no turning back now. "Why come forward now?" he pressed, needing to understand the motives behind this sudden revelation. The informant hesitated, a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossing their features. "Because it's time. Too many lives have been destroyed. Abigail deserves the truth wherever she is." With that, the informant rose, disappearing into the afternoon crowd, leaving Lee alone with the drive that could change everything. He wasted no time, rushing to meet Claire and the team at the makeshift office they'd set up in a nearby motel. As they gathered around, Lee plugged the drive into his laptop, the room silent, the air thick with anticipation. The first file was audio, a conversation between David's brother and an unknown voice, discussing movements and plans with chilling detachment. But it was the second file that sent shivers down their spines. A video, grainy but clear enough, showing Abigail, disheveled and weary, in a room that matched the description given by the neighbor. She was alive, at least at that moment, and the timestamp aligned with the period of her supposed sighting. The team listened, their expressions a mix of disbelief and determination. Every word, every frame of footage painted a picture more sinister than they'd imagined. David's brother wasn't just an accomplice, he was orchestrating something far more complex, with ties reaching into shadowy corners they hadn't yet explored. Claire's voice was steady, resolute. "We need to find him now. This is our chance to bring Abigail home and hold those responsible accountable." As they strategized, a plan forming with each piece of new information, the breakthrough felt tangible, a heartbeat away. But with every revelation came new questions, and the realization that the web was more intricate than they'd dared to imagine. The next move was crucial, the clock ticking ever louder. They needed to corner David's brother, expose the network behind Abigail's abduction, and above all, find her. The journey was far from over, but the path was becoming clearer. The light of justice was closer than ever, and they would stop at nothing to reach it. As the team sat in the dimly lit motel room, the weight of their discovery settled over them like a heavy fog. The realization that David's brother was not just involved, but orchestrating something sinister sent a chill through each of them. The silence stretched, only broken by the hum of the laptop's fan, as they processed the gravity of their next steps. Lee spoke first, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to be smart about this. If David's brother is the key, we can't tip him off and lose our chance." Claire nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to know more about his connections. Who else is involved and how deep does this go?" Just then a soft knock at the door startled them. Claire and Lee exchanged a wary glance before Lee moved cautiously to open it. Standing in the doorway was a familiar face, Detective Harris, the officer, who had been a thorn in their side during the initial investigation, but had since become an unexpected ally. Harris entered, his expression grim. "I heard you might have something big. What have you got?" Without hesitation, Lee replayed the video, letting Harris absorb the chilling revelation. As the video ended, Harris's face was a mask of disbelief and determination. "We need to move quickly. I've got a few trusted people who can help us out, but we need a plan to bring him in without alerting his network." Claire leaned forward, her mind sharp and focused. "We need to draw him out, make him think he's safe. If he's as connected as we think, he'll have eyes everywhere. We need to be invisible." Harris nodded, already formulating a strategy. "I can get us access to surveillance and tap into his communications. If we can track his movements, we might find where he's keeping Abigail." As they planned, the pieces began to fall into place. The image of David's brother, a seemingly ordinary man with a sinister secret, loomed large in their minds. He was a respected figure in his community, a volunteer at local charities, and a fixture at neighborhood gatherings. No one would suspect the darkness lurking beneath his genial exterior. The team worked through the night, fueled by adrenaline and the hope of finally bringing Abigail home. As dawn broke, their plan was set. Harris would coordinate with his contacts to ensure their approach was undetected, while Lee and Claire would continue to dig deeper into David's brother's life, uncovering the facade he had so carefully constructed. By the time the sun hung high in the sky, they were ready. The air was thick with anticipation as they prepared to execute the operation that could finally unravel the mystery that had haunted them for so long. But as they moved, a sense of unease settled over Claire. There was something they were missing, a piece of the puzzle that hadn't yet revealed itself. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. They were on the brink of a breakthrough, and nothing would stop them now. The day stretched into evening, and as darkness fell, they moved into position, ready for the confrontation that could change everything. The killer in plain sight would soon be exposed, and with him, the secrets he had so desperately tried to hide. As the twilight deepened, the team took their positions, hearts pounding with the weight of the moment. Harris, concealed in the shadows, directed the operation from his vantage point, eyes fixed on the surveillance feeds. Every rustle of leaves, every distant siren, seemed amplified in the tense silence. Inside a modest suburban house, David's brother, Mark, sat at his kitchen table, a facade of normalcy masking the storm brewing beneath. He was unaware of the digital eyes tracking his every move, of the silent figures assembling outside his door. The plan was meticulous, designed to leave no room for error. They needed a confession, concrete proof that would ensure Abigail's safe return and bring justice after years of unanswered questions. At a signal from Harris, the team moved in. The door swung open with practiced precision, and the dimly lit room was flooded with light. Mark blinked, momentarily dazed by the sudden intrusion. The genial mask slipped as realization dawned. His carefully constructed world was crumbling. They ushered him to an unmarked car, his protests echoing in the night air. Once at the station, the interrogation began. Claire and Lee faced him across the table, their expressions steely yet compassionate, aware of the delicate balance they needed to maintain. "We know what you've done, Mark." "We know everything," Claire began, her voice steady. "This is your chance to tell your side of the story." Mark shifted in his chair, the veneer of calm slowly peeling away. His eyes, once so sure, flitted nervously between his interrogators. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Lee leaned forward, a photograph of Abigail in his hand. "You remember her, don't you? Abigail. She's been missing for 16 years. Her family deserves the truth." The room was silent save for the ticking of the clock. Seconds stretched into an eternity, and then, with a heavy sigh, Mark spoke, the guilt of years breaking free. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was supposed to be temporary," he confessed, his words raw and fractured. He recounted the events of that fateful day in 2007, the argument that spiraled out of control, the panic that followed. He admitted to keeping Abigail hidden, manipulating her life through threats and coercion, while presenting a facade of benevolence to the world. The confession was chilling, a narrative of manipulation and control that left the detectives reeling. But it was the breakthrough they needed. With Mark's admission, the path was clear to locate Abigail and bring her home. In the courtroom, the trial unfolded with the community watching in shock and disbelief. Mark, once seen as a pillar of society, now stood exposed, his deeds laid bare for all to see. The jury deliberated, their verdict a resounding affirmation of justice. Mark was sentenced to life, the weight of his actions finally matched by the punishment. Abigail, after years in the shadows, stepped into the light. Her reunion with her husband was bittersweet, a moment of joy marred by the years lost. The community rallied around them, offering support and solace as they navigated the path to healing. The case left an indelible mark on the town, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. But in its wake, there was hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of truth. As Claire and Lee watched the sun set on another day, they reflected on the journey. Justice had been served, But the real victory lay in the return of a loved one, the restoration of a family. In the quiet solitude of the moment, they understood that while some memories fade, others endure, etched into the fabric of life, guiding us toward the light.